Hey guys, it's Charlene. Today I'm going to show you how to make 3 different cards using the new It's My Party 2 collection from Spellbinders. So I'm going to show you the cards first so you have an idea where we're going. I'm going to show you lots of different styles here and hopefully you can pick up some tips and tricks along the way. So the first kind of card that we're going to do is a trifold card. So you can see I took a piece of 8.5 by 11 cardstock and I cut it in half. I'm scoring each piece at 4¼ inches, so essentially I'm going to have 2 A2 sized card panels here. And the reason we need these 2 panels is because one 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper is not long enough to create the trifold. So we're actually going to glue one of these card bases essentially into the other. So once I have these scored here, I'll show you how this works just because it's a little easier to see it in action than to just hear about it. So you see you have one card on the left, one card on the right, and then one part of each card is going to be glued together. I'm starting with the right hand flap, so essentially the card base that opens to the right, and I have it there in my mini MISTI, and I'm going to stamp out one of the sentiments from the Party Balloon Garland clear stamp set. So it says, "Let the celebration begin," and then I'm going to take this and I'm going to put some clear embossing powder on and heat set it. Now, I did use pigment ink, and that is why I'm heat embossing the sentiment, is because I don't want any chance of that ink smearing when I run it through inside this embossing folder. This is the Tiny Dots embossing folder. Many of the Spellbinders embossing folders are really large, so it's great because you can use them for all kinds of different sized cards. So once that front flap is done for the right, I'm going to move on to the front flap for the left hand side. And you can see I've taken out the balloon garland stamp and I've put it on top of the card base that's going to open to the left. And I'm using a pencil just to go along the edge of the stamp. And this is going to help me later, you'll see. So I've put some anti-static powder tool down here and again going to stamp in black pigment ink, and then I'll come in again with some clear embossing powder and heat set this. That part wasn't necessary for this side, but I thought it would look nice because the shine from the balloon garland would match the shine that is on the sentiment. Now, you guys didn't see it, but for whatever reason, I had to redo this twice. I kept forgetting to put the anti-static powder tool on there, and then it was kind of sticking everywhere. I don't know where my brain was today, but it was definitely not working well when it came to making cards. So here I've got my heat gun out, I'm melting all of that embossing powder, and then I'm going to come in with the coordinating stencil set. So this is the Balloon Garland and Sentiments stencil, and you can see it has multiple layers, so that way when you go in and color the balloons, you can use lots of different colors without having to really think too much about it. So that was Kitsch Flamingo Distress Oxide. Now I'm coming in with some squeezed lemonade Distress Oxide. And then my third color is going to be Saltwater Taffy. On my 4th stencil, I'm going to use it for a detail layer. I do this quite frequently where I go in and I add some type of texture paste or glitter glue or something like that. And for this one, I am using stickles. I've been using them a lot lately. I'm trying to get items from my stash that I don't use very often and really put them to some use. So this is the icicle stickles. It has a little bit bigger of pieces of glitter. Unfortunately, that also means that it gets clogged more often. So you can kind of see there that I made a bit of a mess while I was doing that. Not too bad though. You just want to make sure to go to your sink and wash off your stencil when you're all done. Now I'm going to use that hand-drawn line that we put earlier when we outlined the stamp on the side, and I'm going to use that as my cutting guide. So you're going to see on the left-hand side now, we have a partial flap that is going to open from the left. To keep the front of the card balanced, I'm going to add a little bit of color onto the right-hand side so that the color from the balloon garland on the left-hand side doesn't overpower the whole card. So to do that, I just cut out a couple strips of white cardstock and I'm putting the same colors that we used for the balloon garland on them. So from left to right there, it's Squeezed Lemonade, Kitsch Flamingo, and then Saltwater Taffy. And now I can glue those onto that card front, and I'm gonna glue them in between the rows of dots. So you'll have this nice bit of color on the right-hand side. You've also got the lovely texture from the dots. And then on the left-hand side, you're gonna have that beautiful balloon garland with all of its colors and sparkliness. For the back panel, it doesn't matter which piece you glue into the other one. I chose to glue the left into the right because I actually got a little bit of ink on the back of the left-hand side card base, so I could easily cover that up by gluing the right-hand side card base so that it was the back of the panel. Hopefully that makes sense as you're seeing it here. And so now there is the finished card. It stands up really well. And you could use this style of card for lots of different stamp sets. For our second card here, I'm going to do a little bit of hot foiling. I'm not going to focus on that too much because you could do this with any stamp set you have where you have a large sentiment. This is a really fun plate though. This is the Glimmering Poppin Birthday Hot Foil Plate and Die Set. And you're going to see here when I pull off the hot foil, it is just really fun. I've run it through my die cutting machine one time there after the timer was finished. I did this in gold, and you'll see it's going to tie in really well with the rest of the card. But here is that fun sentiment. It says, "Have a poppin' birthday." Love that. So I've put this on my Brutus Monroe sticky mat, and I've got some anti-static powder tool there, and I'm actually going to stamp that same balloon garland that we used on the first card, but we're going to use it in a very different way. I'm stamping this out with some clear embossing ink. This is from Wow. And I'm just going to make sure to get a nice coating of embossing ink on that stamp before I press it down on my card panel. I did cut down the card panel, so it's an A2 sized card panel, so it's 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bend the mat so that I can get my card panel off of there. And I'm not going to touch the front of the card panel on the left-hand side though. I'm going to be careful because I'm going to flip it around 180 degrees and put it right back on the sticky mat so that I can do the same thing on the other side. I carefully removed it again, and then I added some gold embossing powder all over the card front. I did have a few stray pieces of embossing powder, so off camera I used a tiny paintbrush in order to kind of flick those off of the cardstock. And now I'm coming in with my heat gun and I'm melting all of that beautiful gold embossing powder. Now this gold embossing powder in particular goes together really well with the gold foil, and that's the Ranger Gold Superfine Detail Embossing Powder. And now I'm using those stencils again. This time I'm using my pouncers instead of blending brushes. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to use that stencil on each side to color the balloon. So I just need to rotate it 180 degrees, line it up, and then I can stamp the right-hand side the same as the left-hand side. Color-wise, I am using some Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated inks for this card. The first color was Guava, which is a really beautiful pink. And then I've got some Grapefruit here, which is going to dry back to a really nice orange. And then for my green, I'm going to be using some Sprout. And then I'm going to come in with an aqua color, which is Surf. And these are some of my favorite colors. I think they go together really well. They look a little bit intense right now, but they're going to dry back really well for the next stage of our card here. Now you could leave this card front as is, add some sequins or something like that, or some enamel dots. I'm going to step it up here and actually do a full front shaker. And this is really easy to do with cellophane or with stamp packaging. You don't have to go out and buy any kind of special materials unless you want to. I'm using shaker sheets here just because they're nice and clean, and I know they don't have any dings or anything like that in them, but they're really not necessary. You could use some stamp packaging. So I put some double-sided tape all the way around on the back of the card panel. and I've cut my piece of cellophane so it's just slightly larger than my card base. And you can see I started with one of the long sides of the card, and I just removed the release paper from the double-sided tape, always starting in the middle, so that way you can ensure you get a nice fit with the cellophane over the card, and then kind of working your way left to right, being careful just to push it over onto that double-sided tape and make sure it's sticking. Once you get the two long sides done, you can do the exact same thing on one of the short sides, but you don't want to take off the last side's release tape. And the reason is because you're going to be adding your shaker mix to that side. It's going to be a lot easier this way than trying to add your shaker mix and then close everything up. So don't do it that way. It's much more difficult that way. This way it makes it fast and easy. You can trim off any excess cellophane. Just be careful that you cut a little bit up from the corner so you're not putting any holes into your card when you're doing that. I'm using the Iridescent Moonshine Sequin Mix, and I'm going to be combining that also with some gold coin embellishments. So I want to explain why I chose this. You have all this beautiful color on the front of your card. You have that gorgeous sentiment that's on the inside. It's underneath the cellophane. And so when you have your shaker mix going everywhere, you really still want to be able to see the sentiment pretty well. So the Iridescent Moonshine is essentially clear, but it's shiny and kind of picks up some of the light and colors around it. And now I'm coming in and I'm adding that little bit of the gold coin embellishment, so it's going to pick up all of the gold that is in the rest of the card, but I'm only putting a little bit, so that way it's not overwhelming the sentiment on the inside of the card. Once I get everything how I like it, I just remove that last piece of release paper and close everything up. I've added a couple of pieces of double-sided tape to the back, so now I can adhere the whole panel to an A2 sized card base, and that is going to finish this card off. I love these full front shakers, largely because they are so fun and interactive and pretty, but they don't have the same bulk that a regular shaker does. I foiled the same sentiment that I used before for my third card. I used some fuchsia flower hot foil, very pretty, and I used the corresponding die to go ahead and cut that out. Now I'm going to create my background piece, and I'm pulling out something that I have not used in a while. It is the Distress Mica spray stains. These are beautiful, you guys. I love them. I don't use them often enough. They're just so fun and shiny. Now they are seasonal, and so around Halloween, around Christmas, somewhere around there, Tim Holtz comes out with these, and there's a couple that come out one year and a couple that come out the next year, and they flip-flop back and forth like that. So I'm not sure if these two colors that I'm using are currently available. You could probably find them somewhere though, and if not this year, they're available next year, or there's other similar colors that you could order. You can let the panel air dry, or you can use a heat tool like I did, and then you can run it through an embossing folder, and the results are just phenomenal. I am using the Floating Balloons 3D embossing folder, which is fun for all kinds of different occasions, not just birthdays. And you can see here, it is so cool, you guys. Look at the texture that that embossing folder adds. It's just beautiful, and it picks up all of the mica that's in the spray stain, so you have this beautiful 3D shiny shimmery look. I did go ahead and cut out 2 extra of the die cut for the sentiment, so that way I can glue these all together and get a thicker sentiment. It's going to add some dimension to the card and look really nice. You could use foam tape here instead if you wanted to, but I find that liquid adhesive tends to work better for me when I am gluing things onto an embossed card panel. So I've got some pretty shiny little stars here that I am gluing to the card front. I've got about 5 of them, not a bunch, but it adds just a little bit more shine and shimmer, as if we don't have enough already, right? I am popping the entire back panel up with some thin foam tape. from Altenew. It's really nice. I like the thickness of their foam tape. It's not too much. It makes it so that your cards can still fit well inside of an envelope. And then once I like where everything is, I can push the panel down, remove the rest of the release tape, being careful just to make sure I get everything adhered well. And that is going to finish off the third card. I love those little sparkly stars. So going back, there's our first card with the trifold, then our full front shaker, and lastly we have that beautiful Distress Mica spray stain card. I hope you guys picked up some tips and tricks today. Thanks for joining me. Please be sure to like and subscribe, as well as hit that notification bell so that I can continue bringing you more crafty content in the future. Until next time, happy crafting.